The message arrived at 3 in the morning, Earth time. Ambassador Catherine Cole was sleeping in her small quarters aboard Earth Station, Meridian, when the alarm pulled her from her dreams. She sat up quickly, her heart beating fast. Emergency messages never brought good news. She walked to her desk and touched the screen. A hologram appeared in the air, showing a symbol she had only seen in history books and diplomatic files. It was the seal of the Galactic Council, the ruling body of 12 ancient species who had controlled the known galaxy for 50,000 years. Catherine read the message 3 times to make sure she understood it correctly. The Galactic Council was summoning humanity. They wanted a representative to appear before them within 3 standard cycles. That was roughly 6 Earth days. In the 8 years since humanity had made first contact with alien life, the Council had ignored them completely. Humans were considered a juvenile species, barely able to travel between stars. The elder races saw humanity the way adults might see a toddler learning to walk. Amusing, perhaps, but not important. So why were they calling now? Catherine dressed quickly and contacted her aide, Samuel Price. He was a young man with brown hair and eyes who had worked with her for 5 years. He answered the call from his own quarters, looking confused and worried. "I saw the message," he said. "What do you think it means?" "I don't know," Catherine admitted. "But we need to find out everything we can before we go." They spent the next hour gathering information. Samuel searched through every database and intelligence report they had access to. Catherine made calls to contacts on other stations and colonies. By the time the sun rose over Earth below them, they had put together a troubling picture. Something bad was happening in the galaxy. A group called the Hegemony of Silence had been conquering worlds in the outer regions. They were not just defeating their enemies. They were erasing them. Entire populations were disappearing without any trace. Planets that had held billions of lives were found empty, with no sign of what had happened to the people who lived there. The Galactic Council, with all their ancient ships and advanced technology, had done nothing to stop it. They had issued statements of concern. They had held meetings, but they had not acted. "Maybe they want our help," Samuel suggested. Catherine shook her head. "We have the smallest fleet in known space. Our technology is centuries behind theirs. What could we possibly offer? Then why summon us?" Catherine did not have an answer. She contacted Admiral Gregory Lane at Fleet Command. The Admiral was an old man who had spent his entire life preparing humanity for the challenges of space. He had white hair, deep wrinkles, and eyes that had seen too much. He listened to Catherine's report without saying a word. "Take the Constellation," he said when she finished. "It's our best diplomatic ship. I'll send Commander Lisa Murray with a squadron to escort you. Do you think we'll need protection?" Catherine asked. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. "I think we need to be ready for anything. The Council has never shown interest in us before. If they're reaching out now, it means something has changed. And change in the galaxy usually means danger for the small and the weak." Catherine spent the next 2 days preparing for the journey. She studied everything humanity knew about the 12 elder species. She practiced diplomatic phrases in 6 alien languages. She read reports about the Hegemony of Silence until her eyes hurt. The Constellation was waiting for her at the main docking bay. It was a beautiful ship, sleek and white, designed to show that humanity could create things of elegance and grace. Commander Lisa Murray met her at the airlock. Murray was a woman in her 40s with short black hair and a no-nonsense attitude. She had commanded ships in 3 different conflicts and had earned a reputation for keeping her crews alive in impossible situations. "Ambassador," Murray said with a nod, "my squadron is ready. We'll keep you safe." "I appreciate that, Commander. Though I hope safety won't be an issue." Murray's expression suggested she did not share that hope. The journey to Nexus Prime took 4 days at faster than light speed. Catherine spent most of that time in the observation lounge, watching the stars streak past and thinking about what lay ahead. Samuel brought her meals and reports, but she barely touched either. On the 3rd day, Murray joined her in the lounge. The commander sat down across from Catherine and looked out at the endless darkness of space. "I've been talking to my intelligence contacts," Murray said. "The situation is worse than the official reports suggest." "How much worse?" "The hegemony has technology no one understands. They can disable entire fleets without firing a shot. They can crack planets open like eggs. And they don't take prisoners. Every world they conquer goes silent. No refugees. No survivors. No explanations." Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. "And the Council is doing nothing?" "The Council is scared. Some of my contacts think they're planning to negotiate, to offer the hegemony something in exchange for being left alone." "What could they possibly offer?" Murray met her eyes. "Territory, resources, people." The word hung in the air between them. People. Lives traded like currency to buy safety for others. "They wouldn't," Catherine said. But her voice lacked conviction. "They've ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years by making hard choices, by calculating acceptable losses, by sacrificing the few to save the many." Murray leaned forward. "Ambassador, I think they summoned us to tell us we're the sacrifice." Catherine wanted to argue. She wanted to believe that the elder species, with all their wisdom and experience, would never do something so cruel. But she had studied history, both human and alien. She knew what civilizations were capable of when they were afraid. "Then we need to be ready," she said quietly. "Ready for what?" Catherine looked out at the stars, thinking about Earth, about the 8 billion people who called it home, about the colonies and stations scattered across nearby systems. They were her responsibility. All of them. "Ready to fight," she said. "Ready to refuse. Ready to remind the galaxy that humanity does not go quietly." Murray studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I was hoping you would say that." The constellation dropped out of faster than light travel the next morning. Nexus Prime filled the view screen, an artificial world the size of a small moon, covered in lights and structures that had stood for thousands of centuries. It was beautiful and terrifying, a monument to power that humanity could barely imagine. Catherine stood on the bridge, watching as they approached. Somewhere on that ancient world, the Galactic Council was waiting. They had ruled the galaxy since before humans had learned to make fire. They had seen empires rise and fall like waves on a shore, but they had never met anyone like Catherine Cole, and they had never met a species like humanity. She straightened her uniform and prepared to make history. The docking procedures at Nexus Prime took 3 hours. Catherine watched through the viewport as small ships flew around the constellation, scanning every part of the hull. Security drones examined the engines. Communication signals requested identification codes that humanity barely understood. Samuel stood beside her, looking nervous. "They really don't trust anyone, do they?" "They've survived for 50,000 years, Catherine replied. "Trust is probably not how they did it." Finally, the constellation was allowed to dock at a massive station. On the outer edge of Nexus Prime, Commander Murray reported that her escort ships had been directed to wait in a holding pattern far from the artificial world. Only the diplomatic vessel was permitted to approach. "They're isolating us," Murray said over the communication system. "If something goes wrong, we won't be able to reach you quickly." "Understood, Commander. Hopefully nothing will go wrong." "Hope is not a strategy, Ambassador." Catherine smiled despite her worry. "Sometimes it's all we have." A delegation was waiting for them at the airlock. 3 aliens from different species stood in formal robes that shimmered with colors Catherine could not name. The tallest one was a Kelmari, a being with pale blue skin and 4 arms. It bowed slightly and spoke in a language that her translator turned into flat, emotionless words. Ambassador Cole of Earth, the Galactic Council welcomes you to Nexus Prime. We will escort you to the council chamber. Thank you, Catherine said. May I ask what this meeting concerns? The Kelmari's face showed no expression. All will be explained in the chamber. They walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The walls were made of materials that glowed with soft light. The floor was smooth and warm beneath Catherine's boots. Everything was designed to show power and permanence, to remind visitors that they were very small and the council was very old. Samuel walked beside Catherine, recording everything with a small device hidden in his sleeve. They passed chambers filled with artwork from 1,000 different worlds. They passed windows that looked out on gardens where plants from across the galaxy grew in careful arrangements. They passed other beings from species Catherine had never seen, all going about their business without giving the humans more than a curious glance. This place is incredible, Samuel whispered. It's meant to be, Catherine replied. It's meant to make us feel insignificant. The Kelmari guide glanced back at her with something that might have been surprise. Perhaps it was not used to visitors understanding the purpose behind the design. After an hour of walking, they reached a massive door made of what looked like solid gold. Symbols were carved into its surface, representing each of the 12 elder species. The door opened slowly, revealing the council chamber beyond. Catherine had seen images of the chamber in diplomatic files. The images had not prepared her for the reality. The room was enormous, larger than any building on Earth. 12 platforms rose from the floor like mountains, each one holding a representative of an elder species. The platforms were arranged in a circle around a single small spot in the center. That spot, Catherine realized, was where she was expected to stand. She walked to the center of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. Samuel was directed to wait by the door. She was alone. High above her, the 12 representatives looked down. The Kelmari representative, called High Arbiter Velthos, sat on the largest platform. His forearms were folded across his chest, and his dark eyes watched Catherine like a scientist studying an insect. To his right was Speaker Meth of the Verati, a being made entirely of living crystal. Light passed through its body, creating rainbows on the walls. To the left was the Druzen representative, a cloud of gas contained in a transparent suit. Other species filled the remaining platforms, some familiar from Catherine's studies, others completely unknown. She stood in the center of all that ancient power and waited. High Arbiter Velthos spoke first. His voice was deep and echoed through the chamber, even though he did not seem to be speaking loudly. Ambassador Catherine Cole of the human species, you have been summoned to hear the decision of the Galactic Council regarding the current crisis. Catherine nodded. I am honored to be here, High Arbiter. Humanity is eager to learn how we can help address the threat of the hegemony of silence. A murmur passed through the platforms. Some of the representatives seemed amused. Others seemed annoyed. Velthos raised one of his hands for silence. Your willingness to assist is noted, he said. However, the Council has not summoned you to request help. The Council has summoned you to inform you of our decision. Catherine felt her stomach tighten. What decision? Speaker Neth's crystalline form pulsed with light as it spoke. The hegemony of silence has proven to be a threat beyond our initial calculations. Their technology and methods are unfamiliar. Their goals are unclear. What is clear is that they cannot be defeated through conventional means. Another representative spoke, a being that looked like a giant insect wrapped in silk. We have analyzed every possible military response. Each simulation ends in failure. The hegemony's power is too great. So the Council has decided to pursue a diplomatic solution, Velthos continued. We will offer terms of conditional surrender to the hegemony. Catherine could not believe what she was hearing. Surrender? You're going to surrender without even fighting? We are going to preserve what can be preserved, Velthos replied. The hegemony has agreed to spare the core worlds of the elder species in exchange for certain concessions. What concessions? The chamber fell silent. The representatives looked at each other, and Catherine understood that they did not want to answer her question. But she needed to know. She needed to hear them say it. Tell me, she demanded. What are you giving them? Speaker Mneth answered, its voice like glass breaking. The outer territories. All planets and systems beyond the core regions. All species residing in those areas will be left to face the hegemony without council protection or assistance. Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. She thought about the map she had studied, about where Earth and the human colonies were located. Far from the core. In the outer territories. In the regions being abandoned. You're sacrificing us, she said. You're trading our lives for your safety. We are making the only rational choice, Velthos replied. The mathematics are clear. We can save billions by sacrificing millions. It is tragic, but necessary. Necessary for whom? Not for the people being fed to the hegemony. The insect representative made a clicking sound that the translator rendered as impatience. You are a juvenile species. You cannot understand the complexity of these decisions. The Council has guided the galaxy for 50,000 years. We know what must be done. Catherine looked up at all of them. These ancient beings who had watched civilizations rise and fall, who had accumulated wisdom beyond human imagination. She saw their certainty. She saw their cold calculation. And she saw something else. She saw fear. They were not making a strategic decision. They were running away. They were hiding behind walls of logic and mathematics to avoid facing the truth. The hegemony frightened them, and they would do anything to make that fear go away. Even if it meant condemning billions of innocent people to death, that Catherine had come to this chamber ready to listen, ready to cooperate, ready to find a way for humanity to help. But standing in the center of all that ancient power, she realized that help was not what these beings wanted. They wanted obedience. They wanted humanity to accept its fate quietly and make their surrender easier. She thought about Earth. She thought about her family, her friends, the children who would never grow up if the Council had its way. She thought about every human who had ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of something more. And she made a decision. No, she said. The word was quiet, but it echoed through the chamber like thunder. The representatives stared down at her with shock and confusion. No one had ever said that word to the Galactic Council before. Catherine Cole had just made history, and she was only getting started. The silence in the council chamber was complete. Catherine could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. 12 ancient species stared down at her from their towering platforms, and she stared back without flinching. High Arbiter Velthos leaned forward, his forearms gripping the edges of his seat. Perhaps you did not understand, Ambassador Cole. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. The Council has made its decision. I understood perfectly, Catherine replied, and I reject your decision. Murmurs erupted across the platforms. Speaker Neth's crystal body flashed with angry colors. The Drusian representative's gas cloud swirled rapidly inside its containment suit. Several other beings made sounds that the translator could not fully interpret, but that clearly expressed outrage. You cannot reject our decision, the insect representative clicked. You have no authority here. Humanity is not even a recognized member of galactic society. You are guests at best, pests at worst. Then perhaps you should not have invited us, Catherine said. But you did. You brought us here to tell us that we are going to die so that you can live. Did you expect us to thank you? We expected you to understand reality, Velthos said. The hegemony cannot be stopped. Fighting them would only delay the inevitable and increase the suffering. By accepting their terms now, we preserve the maximum number of lives. You preserve your lives, your worlds, your power. Catherine took a step forward, and her voice grew stronger. The rest of us are just numbers in your calculation. Acceptable losses. A new voice spoke from one of the smaller platforms. Catherine looked up to see a being she had not noticed before. A creature that looked like a tall, thin human covered in silver scales. This was a Sethrani, a species that humanity had limited contact with. The human raises a valid point, the Sethrani said. The Council's definition of acceptable losses seems to exclude the Council entirely. We sacrifice others while keeping ourselves safe. The Sethrani would do well to remember their place, Speaker Meth said coldly. Your species was nearly destroyed by the Void Plague 3,000 years ago. The Council saved you then. You owe us your existence. And we have spent 3,000 years repaying that debt with loyalty and service, the Sethrani replied. Perhaps too much loyalty. Perhaps it is time we asked harder questions about who the Council truly serves. The chamber erupted into arguments. Representatives shouted at each other across the vast space. Catherine watched the chaos with growing amazement. She had cracked something open, exposed a division that had been hidden beneath the surface of galactic politics. Velthos raised all four arms and bellowed for silence. The arguments died down slowly, reluctantly. This discussion is pointless, the High Arbiter declared. The Council has made its decision by proper procedure. The terms of surrender have already been communicated to the hegemony. In 10 standard cycles, the agreement will be finalized. There is nothing more to discuss. Catherine shook her head. Then you made your decision too soon. Because I have something to discuss. You have nothing that interests this Council. I have the truth. Catherine looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative she could see. I have been studying the hegemony since I received your summons. I have analyzed every piece of intelligence humanity could gather, and I have reached a conclusion that apparently escaped the wisdom of the elder species. What conclusion? The Sethrani asked, leaning forward with interest. The hegemony is afraid. Laughter echoed from several platforms. The insect representative made a sound like breaking glass that the translator rendered as mockery. Even Speaker Neth's crystal form seemed to pulse with amusement, but Catherine did not back down. Think about their tactics. They strike quickly, overwhelmingly, and then they disappear entire populations. Why? If they were truly as powerful as they want us to believe, they would leave witnesses. They would let survivors spread fear of their might. Instead, they leave nothing. No evidence. No testimony. No proof of what they can do. Because they are monsters, the Druzen said. Because they enjoy destruction. Or because they don't want anyone to examine their methods too closely. Because they don't want anyone to figure out their weaknesses. Catherine pointed upward at the gathered representatives. You've been running simulations based on the worst-case assumptions. You've been assuming the hegemony is exactly as powerful as they claim to be. But what if they're not? Velthos shook his head. You are grasping at hopes because you cannot accept reality. The hegemony has destroyed fleets that dwarf anything humanity could assemble. They have cracked planets. These are facts, not assumptions. They cracked one planet, Catherine corrected. One, and it was uninhabited. A demonstration, not a battle. Every other victory has been through technology we don't understand. Disabling ships, silencing communications, making populations vanish. These are impressive tricks. But tricks can be countered. And how would you counter technology that has defeated the combined fleets of 3 elder species? Catherine smiled grimly. By not fighting the way you fight. By not surrendering the way you surrender. By remembering something that humanity learned a long time ago. What is that? That the only truly unbeatable enemy is the one you refuse to face. Catherine's voice rang through the chamber, strong and clear. Humanity has faced extinction before. We faced ice ages that froze our world, plagues that killed half our population, wars that threatened to destroy everything we built. Every time, people said resistance was pointless. Every time, people calculated the odds and decided surrender was the only rational choice. And every time, someone refused to accept that calculation. She paused, looking at the faces of the ancient beings surrounding her. We're still here, not because we were the smartest or the strongest, because we were the most stubborn, because we refused to quit even when quitting made sense. The Sethrani representative made a sound of approval. A few other beings on the smaller platforms seemed to be listening with something other than contempt, but the elder species on the highest platforms remained unmoved. Pretty words, Speaker Mnef said. But words do not stop armies. Words do not protect planets. The Council deals in reality, Ambassador Cole, not in inspiration. Then let me give you some reality. Catherine took a deep breath. Humanity will not accept your surrender terms. We will not go quietly into extinction. And we will not stand by while you condemn billions of other beings to death, just because they weren't lucky enough to be born on a core world. Then humanity will stand alone, Thalthos said. And humanity will fall. Catherine nodded slowly. Maybe, but we'll fall fighting. We'll fall resisting. And we'll fall proving that there's another way. That courage isn't dead in this galaxy. That some things are still worth dying for. She turned to look at the Sethrani representative. At the other smaller platforms, where beings from less powerful species watched the confrontation with wide eyes. Anyone who wants to fall with us is welcome. Anyone who would rather fight than be fed to the hegemony. Anyone who would rather die free than live as a bargaining chip, come find us. Humanity doesn't have much to offer. We don't have ancient wisdom or advanced technology. But we have this. She placed her hand over her heart. We have the belief that tomorrow can be better than today. That every life matters. That hope is not weakness. That is what makes us human. And apparently, that is what this galaxy has forgotten. The chamber was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. Catherine had planted a seed. Whether it would grow remained to be seen. High Arbiter Velthor stood on his platform, his face twisted with an emotion Catherine could not identify. Remove this human from the chamber, he commanded. The council has heard enough. Guards moved toward Catherine, but she held up her hand and walked toward the door on her own. She had said what she came to say. Now it was time to see if anyone had been listening. Samuel was waiting outside the chamber doors, his face pale with worry. He had heard everything through the communication link in Catherine's uniform. As she emerged, he fell into step beside her, whispering urgently. Ambassador, what you said in there, you basically declared war on the entire galactic establishment. They could arrest us. They could destroy the constellation before we reach open space. They could, Catherine agreed. But they won't. They're too busy arguing with each other to deal with one human diplomat. How can you be sure? Because I saw their faces when I spoke. Some of them were angry, yes. But others were interested. Others were relieved. Someone finally said what they were all too afraid to say. Catherine walked faster, eager to reach the ship. The council isn't as united as they want everyone to believe. The surrender plan has critics. We just gave those critics something to rally around. They reached the constellation an hour later. Commander Murray was waiting at the airlock, her expression tight with tension. I've been monitoring council communications, Murray said. It's chaos in there. 3 species have formally objected to the surrender terms. 2 more are demanding a new vote. The Sethrani representative has requested a private meeting with you. Catherine felt a spark of hope. Already? Whatever you said in there, Ambassador, it worked. But we need to move fast. The High Arbiter has supporters too, and they're pushing to have you detained before you can leave Nexus Prime. Then we leave now. Signal the escort squadron and prepare for immediate departure. The Constellation launched from the docking station as soon as the airlock sealed. Catherine watched Nexus Prime shrink behind them, the ancient artificial world that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. It looked smaller now, less impressive, less permanent. Murray joined her on the bridge. We've cleared the security perimeter. No pursuit yet, but I've been monitoring traffic, and there's a lot of movement around the station. Ships launching, communications flying in all directions. You've stirred up something big. I hope so, because stirring things up is only the first step. Now we need to build something real. Catherine turned to Samuel. I need you to prepare a broadcast. Every frequency we can reach. Every translator protocol we have. I'm going to send a message to the galaxy. Samuel nodded and hurried to the communication station. Within minutes, he had configured the Constellation systems to transmit on hundreds of different channels. Species across the galaxy would hear Catherine's words, translated into their own languages. She stood in front of the camera and took a deep breath. This was the moment. This was where humanity would either rise to meet the challenge or be swept away by the tide of history. My name is Catherine Cole, she began. I am an ambassador of humanity, a species that most of you have never heard of. We are young. We are small. We are not powerful by galactic standards. But today, I stood before the Galactic Council and refused to accept their judgment. She paused, letting the words sink in across the vast distances of space. The Council has decided to surrender to the hegemony of silence. They have calculated the lives that can be saved and the lives that will be lost. They've decided that some of us are acceptable losses, that our deaths are a fair price for their survival. They've decided this without asking us, without consulting us, without giving us any choice in our own fate. Catherine's voice grew stronger, carrying the conviction she felt in her heart. Humanity does not accept this decision. We will not go quietly into death. We will not sacrifice ourselves for the comfort of others. And we will not stand by while the Council condemns billions of innocent beings to destruction. She looked directly into the camera, imagining all the eyes that would see this message. All the beings who have been told they did not matter. I am announcing the formation of the Human Coalition. This is an alliance of anyone willing to fight for their survival, anyone willing to stand against the hegemony, anyone who believes that courage is not extinct in this galaxy. We have no ancient wisdom. We have no advanced weapons. We have only our determination and our refusal to surrender. If your world has been abandoned by the Council, you are welcome in our alliance. If your people have been written off as acceptable losses, you are welcome. If you have been told that resistance is futile and surrender is the only option, come to us. We will prove them wrong together. Catherine thought about all the stories humanity had told itself over thousands of years. Stories of underdogs defeating giants. Stories of hope triumphing over despair. Stories of small groups changing the course of history through nothing but courage and determination. The hegemony wants us to be afraid. They want us to believe they cannot be stopped. They want us to give up before we even try. But I have studied their tactics, and I see the truth. They are not gods. They are not invincible. They are conquerors who have never faced an enemy that refused to break. She smiled, and there was fire in her eyes. Humanity has faced impossible odds before. We have survived ice ages, plagues, and wars that should have destroyed us. Every time, someone told us to accept defeat. Every time, we refused. And every time, we found a way to keep going. This is not just about survival. This is about what kind of galaxy we want to live in. A galaxy where the powerful sacrifice the weak whenever it is convenient. A galaxy where life is measured in calculations of acceptable losses. A galaxy where hope itself is considered foolish? Catherine shook her head firmly. No, we choose a different galaxy. A galaxy where every life matters. A galaxy where courage is rewarded. A galaxy where those who would prey upon the innocent face consequences for their crimes. The time for surrender has passed. The time for calculation has ended. The time for war has come. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to something almost intimate, as if she were speaking to each listener personally. Find us. Join us. Fight with us. Or watch from the sidelines and see what happens when a species refuses to accept the impossible. Either way, humanity is going to war. And we are going to show the galaxy what we are made of. The broadcast ended. Catherine stood in silence for a moment, feeling the weight of what she had just done. She had committed humanity to a war they might not be able to win. She had challenged powers that had ruled the galaxy since before humans existed. She had bet everything on the hope that she was right about the hegemony, that their reputation for invincibility was built on fear rather than fact. Samuel's voice broke the silence. Ambassador, we're receiving responses. Catherine turned to look at his screen. Messages were flooding in from across the galaxy. Some were angry, condemning humanity's arrogance. Some were mocking, predicting swift destruction. But others were different. A ship from the Sethrani home fleet was breaking formation and setting course to intercept the constellation. Its captain wanted to discuss alliance terms. A colony of refugees from a world the hegemony had destroyed was offering their services as intelligence gatherers. They had escaped the initial attack and had information about hegemony methods. A mining consortium from the outer territories was pledging their resources to any force, willing to protect them from the council's abandonment. One by one, the responses came. Some were cautious. Some were desperate. Some were simply curious. But they were responding. People across the galaxy had heard Catherine's words, and they were choosing to believe. Commander Murray stepped up beside Catherine, looking at the growing list of contacts. "Well, Ambassador," she said quietly, "it looks like you started something." Catherine nodded, watching the messages roll past. "Now we have to finish it." The constellation set course for home, but already Catherine was planning. Ships to gather, intelligence to analyze, strategies to develop. The council had given them 10 cycles before the surrender was finalized. 10 cycles to build an army from nothing. 10 cycles to prove that hope was stronger than fear. It seemed impossible. But then again, so did everything humanity had ever accomplished. 3 months had passed since Catherine Cole stood before the Galactic Council and said no. 3 months of chaos, hope, fear, and frantic preparation. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The human coalition had grown from a single diplomatic ship into an armada of over 4,000 vessels. They came from everywhere. The Sethrani brought 100 warships and 10,000 warriors eager to prove their worth. The Vorath remnant, survivors of a species the hegemony had nearly wiped out, brought nothing but their rage and their knowledge of enemy tactics. Dozens of other species joined, some with fleets, some with resources, some with nothing but their willingness to fight. Catherine stood on the bridge of the constellation, watching the assembled fleet through the main viewport. Ships of every shape and size floated in formation, their lights blinking against the darkness of space. It was the largest combined force the Outer Territories had ever seen. Admiral Gregory Lane had arrived from Earth 2 weeks ago to take command of military operations. He stood beside Catherine now, his weathered face showing both pride and worry. "The hegemony knows we're coming," he said. "Our scouts report they're massing forces at their forward base in the Void Reach. This won't be a surprise attack." "Good," Catherine replied. "I want them to know we're coming. I want them to see what happens when they push the galaxy too far." Commander Lisa Murray approached with a data tablet. She had been promoted to lead the intelligence division after her network of contacts proved invaluable in recruiting allies. "Ambassador, we've received word from Nexus Prime. 3 elder species have officially withdrawn from the Council and pledged support to the Coalition. The Kelmarian variety are threatening to expel them, but the threats are empty. The Council is fracturing." Catherine nodded. She had hoped for this, but had not dared to expect it. The seeds she had planted in the Council chamber had grown faster than anyone predicted. Once some species started questioning the surrender plan, others followed. Fear of the hegemony was powerful, but so was shame at abandoning allies. "What about the surrender agreement?" she asked. "Suspended indefinitely. The hegemony is apparently furious. They were counting on the Council's cooperation to divide and conquer. Our coalition has disrupted their entire strategy." Admiral Lane grunted with satisfaction. "Good. They expected easy prey. Let's show them what a cornered animal can do." The fleet began moving toward the Void Reach 2 days later. Catherine watched from the bridge as thousands of ships jumped to faster-than-light travel in perfect coordination. Months ago, these species had never worked together. Some had been enemies. Some had never even met. Now they flew as one, united by a common threat and a common hope. The journey took 6 days. Catherine spent most of that time in meetings, coordinating with aligned commanders, reviewing intelligence reports, and preparing for every scenario they could imagine. The hegemony was still dangerous. Their technology was still mysterious. This battle could end in disaster, but it could also end in victory. And that possibility, however slim, was worth everything. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Void Reach. The hegemony fleet was waiting for them, exactly as the scouts had reported. Dark ships hung in space like shadows, their designs alien and threatening. There were fewer of them than the Coalition had expected, but each one was larger than any vessel in the Allied fleet. Admiral Lane opened a communication channel to all Coalition ships. "This is the moment, people. Everything we've built, everything we've sacrificed, comes down to what happens in the next few hours. Remember why you're here. Remember what you're fighting for. And remember that the enemy wants you to be afraid. Don't give them the satisfaction." Catherine added her own voice to the transmission. "I know many of you didn't believe this was possible. I know some of you still have doubts. But look around you. Look at the ships flying beside you. Species that never fought together, standing together. Civilizations that were supposed to be enemies, united as friends. That is something the hegemony never expected. That is something they cannot defeat." She paused, feeling the weight of the moment. "The Council called us acceptable losses. They said our lives were worth trading for their safety. Today, we prove them wrong. Today, we show the galaxy that no one is acceptable losses. Today, we fight not just for ourselves, but for every being who was ever told they didn't matter." The communication channel fell silent. Then, from across the fleet, voices began to respond. Cheers, battle cries, declarations of courage in a dozen different languages. The coalition was ready. The battle began with a hegemony weapon that should have ended it immediately. A wave of energy swept out from the largest enemy ship, the same weapon that had disabled entire fleets in previous battles. It hit the Coalition vessels and passed through them without effect. Catherine felt a surge of triumph. The Vorath remnant's intelligence had been accurate. They had identified the frequency of the weapon and developed countermeasures. The hegemony's greatest advantage had been neutralized. For the first time in recorded history, someone had found a way to fight back. The enemy ships began to move, but their formation was uncertain. They had expected easy victory. They had expected their enemies to be helpless. Instead, they faced a fleet that was advancing with determination and purpose. Admiral Lane gave the order to attack. Coalition vessels swarmed the larger hegemony ships, coordinating their fire with precision that months of training had made possible. Explosions lit up the darkness of space. Ships on both sides were destroyed. But the Coalition kept advancing. Catherine watched the battle unfold, feeling every victory and every loss. These were her people now, all of them. The Sithrani pilots flying into enemy fire. The Vorath commanders directing attacks from their battered ships. The human crews fighting alongside species they had only recently met. They were all part of something bigger than themselves. The turning point came when a Coalition squadron managed to breach the hull of the largest hegemony vessel. Marines from 6 different species fought their way through the corridors, facing enemies that bled and died just like anyone else. The legend of hegemony invincibility shattered with every body that fell. Within hours, the hegemony fleet was in retreat. Their remaining ships scattered, jumping to faster than light travel and fleeing toward the core of their territory. They left behind wreckage, prisoners, and something even more valuable. Hope. Catherine stood on the bridge as reports of victory flooded in from across the fleet. The Coalition had lost ships. They had lost lives. But they had won. They had proven that the hegemony could be beaten. Samuel Price approached her with a communication tablet. Ambassador, we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Species that stayed neutral are asking to join the Coalition. 3 more council members have announced their support. Even the Kalmari are requesting talks. Catherine took the tablet and scrolled through the messages. So many voices. So many beings who had watched the battle and seen what courage could accomplish. What happens now? Samuel asked. Catherine looked out at the stars, thinking about everything that lay ahead. The war was not over. The hegemony would recover and strike back. There would be more battles, more losses, more difficult choices. But the galaxy had changed. The old order was crumbling, and something new was being built in its place. Now we keep going, she said. We push forward until the hegemony understands that conquest has a price. We build alliances that will last beyond this war. We create a galaxy where species work together instead of abandoning each other. She turned to face her crew, her allies, her friends. The council ruled through fear and calculation. They divided the galaxy into those who mattered and those who didn't. We're going to build something different. A community where everyone matters. Where courage is valued more than convenience. Where hope is not weakness but strength. Commander Murray stepped forward. That's a big dream, Ambassador. All dreams start big. Then we make them real, one step at a time. The Coalition fleet began the long journey home, carrying with them the first victory against an enemy everyone had called invincible. Behind them, the Void Reach was quiet, the wreckage of battle drifting slowly through space. But ahead of them, the galaxy was waking up. Species that had been silent were finding their voices. Civilizations that had been afraid were finding their courage. And everywhere, beings were telling each other the story of the human diplomat who stood before the most powerful body in the galaxy and said the words that changed everything. The time for war has come, and humanity had answered the call.